Hello, folks. It's George Leoniak, and welcome to New Geometry. I'm very excited to be here with you today for another video. Today, we're really going to get into looking at what I call the golden circles seed of life pattern. And I've done so many line drawings of all sorts of forms that are created within this essentially seed of life pattern, the six circles around one central one, classic iconic sacred geometry design. And I've infused that with golden ratio circles. But today I'm going to show you how that pattern of the overlapping petals itself will create and construct geometric solids, spherical versions of forms like the dodecahedron, the icosahedron. All the Platonic solids are actually within the circular overlapping vesicas that are created in the pattern. So I've got a bunch of forms surrounded with me. I'm not going to show you them all. We're going to do a big show and tell of all those at the end, but I have pictures of these throughout the slideshow that I'm going to go. But first, before we jump into showing all the forms and talking about that, I just want to give you a little bit of an overview of some of the incredible things about the golden circles seed of life pattern. What does that mean if you've never heard of that before? To me, it's really probably one of the most revolutionary patterns that are, let's just say, revolutionizing my understanding in relationship to sacred geometry and how the phi ratio, and that's why it's called the golden circles, because it incorporates a series of concentric circles that are within phi proportion to one another throughout the blue to the green to the red here are all maintaining a phi relationship within that. So what this has done is it's introduced the phi ratio into this hexagonal template that draws, hexagons very, very well. But how does the pentagon and five-fold symmetry going to relate to this design? And this is really the intention, or really the discovery that came from incorporating the phi ratio into this pattern. I didn't really know what was going to happen at the time, but it opened up this huge doorway. Let me just describe for those who are interested in drawing out there a very simple method, because all that needs to be done is you make your seed of life six circles, if you're familiar with that. And then you're going to take double the radius of the central circle and plant that down here at the bottom edge of this circle and make a little slash mark where it intersects this circle. From there, you send a line to the edge of this petal tip to that intersecting point, and right where that point intersects the vertical line, that horizontal, that angled line I'm showing there, that will give you the first golden circle. From that, everything else is self-explanatory. So I teach this over and over and over again. It's really the fundamental, foundational step, besides drawing the first six circles, that is going to open up a huge world in sacred geometry for you. Now, let me just start showing a few of these things, and we will get to these forms in a moment, because that's the purpose of this video primarily, is to show off the template itself and what it does to create the forms. But here are a few things that were just so amazing about it. This is really one of the most amazing things about the golden circle seed of life, is that it will create a pentagon within the intersections of the design itself, within this circle overlapping pattern. All of the vertices necessary to create a regular pentagon, perfect pentagon, are contained within this pattern. This somehow Marshall Lefferts found out about this pattern, sent it to Robert Grant. They checked it out to prove that it was, 100% accurate method. But there's so much more to it than the one pentagon that we see here, because my intention of working with it was how are the Platonic solids going to fit into this pattern, because I knew that the flower of life and the seed of life by themselves, without a phi ratio relationship, would not produce the dodecahedron and the icosahedron, the two Platonic solids that have pentagon faces included in the geometry, or pentagons related to the geometry. And here is a light dotted blue hexagon outline, which is an icosahedron in this drawing, but I'm showing you that pentagon is tilted here, and it's maintaining phi relationships throughout the whole tilting and angling of that pentagon. So it didn't only draw flat pentagons, it drew these angle pentagons, and the red one in there would be the face of a dodecahedron, which would be nested in the icosahedron. So here are these forms. And this is the icosahedron on the left and dodecahedron over here on the right. And you can see that the points within the diagram are giving us the vertices to construct these in a way that maintains the phi relationship. And that's super important because what that led to was not only showing me how that the Platonic solids were going to nest together with inside one another, it then opened the doorway to create these star polyhedra, the Kepler-Poinsot star polyhedra, very easily within the same pattern for all three of these forms. This is the great icosahedron, the great dodecahedron, the great stellated dodecahedron, and the small stellated dodecahedron in that order. They were like not really accessible to draw with any template that was a circle pattern that I knew of out there. So this really increased my consciousness of these other amazing star polyhedra. And the golden circle template does not only work, the golden circles, let's say, does not only work with the hexagon geometry that we see here, it will work with the fourfold geometry or the fivefold geometry. Of course, it's dominant in the fivefold geometry. But here it's the blend of the two, the 6 and the 5 within this, that really works beautifully. In 6 and 5, I mean hexagon and pentagon. Now, some other amazing things about this pattern were that it also not only allowed me to draw the icosahedron, in a vertically oriented equilateral triangle facing you, it allowed me to rotate the whole geometry to draw this from an angled version, which then put the octahedron, the blue Star of David in the middle here. It allowed me to rotate the whole diagram and have that be the basis, because the internal geometry is linked. And I've discussed this in other videos. Once you rotate the icosahedron, then the octahedron will be straight in the vertical orientation. And if you rotate it the other way, then the octahedron would be tilted in this version over here. But so it contained both of those, and they both provide different ways of looking at the geometry and experiencing it differently. So it's got so much versatility to it. And I'm about to get into more versatility and just covering some of the other very small presentation on what I've been sharing with this pattern over the past 9 months or so. I went and did a whole thing about Dan Winter's star mother model and showing how everything was nested in there at the various scales, starting from the octahedron, tetrahedron, star tetrahedron, cube, the dodeca, small stellated icosahedron, the great stellated, and back to the dodeca again, the large dodecahedron. That's all contained right here in this drawing, right? And then I took it a little bit in a new direction here and created the new geometry Star Child. And I have 2 videos, both on this, Star Mother and Star Child. And then, turn that into a same expansive, implosive, explosive geometry that was based on the rhombic tricontahedron, which is the culminating form, the compound form of the dodecahedron and the icosahedron. Those two come into a compound and they create this rhombic tricontahedron. And then I had some compounded forms along the way, the stellations of the tricontahedron that were in here. But there's so much in this. I mean, I tried to sum up the 30 plus forms that I was able to draw in this pattern in a video called Metatron's Tetraplex. And I felt that this was really, it's based on an icosahedron hull, right? So the icosahedron is very easy to draw in this golden circle seed of life pattern. I mean, it's like, this to me felt like where sacred geometry could really expand in our pattern language from, Metatron's cube to going to thinking in 4D and drawing our forms from a 4-dimensional structure. And this 600 cell actually contains in its reality, what's in its 4D reality, all the 3D geometric Platonic Solids and many other forms with it already. So it just seemed to be a perfect fit to be a kind of tetraplex next level of a form, a drawing form that contains so much. So check out Metatron's tetraplex video and all the forms that I'm just scratching the surface with here. Now, we're going to shift gears here a little bit, and this has always been speculative to me, and it's just really a slide to kind of open us up to the next level of looking at some of these 3D models that I have around me. I came across this image from one of my apprentices, Danny. He, is always researching, does a phenomenal job drawing many of these forms just from watching my videos. And he sent me this image about the quantum entanglement, that the researchers discovered this image related to, two particles in quantum entanglement at a spooky action at a distance. And I looked at this right away, these concentric circles, and I was like, those look like phi ratio. And then I saw this image a long time ago, which this design, I believe, is probably based on. And I put my, the phi ratio circles around it and saw that this little band that was denoting some sort of spooky action at a distance fit right in that band. And I was like, that's the golden circle seed of life pattern that I've been working with, but it's just one example of it. And this little overlapping of the small little vesica in the center is going to become very important for our studies, this presentation in just a moment, as it really captivated my interest. What is this vesica within the large vesica Pisces? What does it have to share? So recently, I got in contact with Micheal Evans through Facebook, and his work is just phenomenal. We had a conversation on the phone about his work with the Trion-re and the Mikey Ball. I didn't even know, and it was a little embarrassing on my phone call with him. I didn't even know that he was the one who created the Mikey Ball, which is this structure here. It's a truncated icosahedron that was made out of all these three-sided shape that Micheal feels has a relationship to the smallest structure that is related to the geometry of light. And it's based on these petals within the flower of life pattern. If you take 3 of those and fold them up in a particular way, you'll create this first form. And then what he discovered was that the negative space between these petals, if you did a few more of these around, would create a 3-sided shape that would essentially be a 3D geometric version of the whole flower of life pattern that then started to construct all these phi ratio forms just from using this petal basically as the connecting piece between the nodes. My question to him while we were on there, and Michael's going to do an interview, new conversation with me, probably within the next week. So I'm looking forward to that. So keep your eye open for that. Subscribe to the channel if you're new here, because that will be coming up soon. And, my question was, what are the connector pieces in here? Because that's really the main question. What's holding this whole thing together, these little spherical connection points that we see here? So I started to contemplate that, and I love the mentors or elders of sacred geometry that I'm able to come in contact with, because Michael's been doing this for more than probably 50 years, and has just, as he'll describe in his videos, the backstory. I won't even get into what he was sharing with me, but he did say to me, which was very inspiring, because I built this form within 10 minutes of getting off the phone with him, just from drawing this pattern and cutting this out, 4 of them, and gluing the edges together. He's like, you do this, you're going to have a spiritual experience with this. And I was like, okay, I'm game for that. So let's see what happens. Well, where that went for me, because I know Micheal has just done so much with this form. I feel like if I started to explore this, I would be creating probably everything that Micheal created, and maybe finding some other things in there too. But I know he's taken his video, his presentations, and the beautiful artwork that he's been producing related to it, the animations that are related to it are just phenomenal. So I was like, what's going on with these petals in the golden circle's seed of life? So this is a pattern that I'm going to explore this through because I was really interested in that, these little overlapping trinity right here. So the flower of life is the red circles, or let's just call it the seed of life, right? And then we have the green and the blue circles in the middle. And where these overlapping green ones are in the middle, that's creating this little triangle in the middle. And that, well, to me, I was like, that's a connector piece in this, right? What's going to happen if I take that little connector piece and cut out the curve? And the beauty of working with, I think Michael's inspiration for me was to really start working more with the curved circles of the pattern rather than just working with the lines. And now we're about to see what the first phase of my understanding of working with the curves within the pattern, what it presented. Well, the first thing I did was, I took out that pattern and then I folded it up and it created this little, I called it the fire, the fire. So it's the instead of the Trion-re, I labeled it fire. And it's what happens is at the end of it, though, these little triangular pieces kind of overlap and they fold up, and we've got this kind of, I don't know, vase-like structure. And then, of course, I say, okay, well, what will this make? What do? I have to make a bunch of these. So I start making them. The first thing I made was this hexagon shape here that I put together, and they just wrapped around. And I was like, whoa, that's the golden circle's seed of life hexagon ring that just folded up like that. But I started to want to build it into, this will just go flat for forever. It wants to be flat structure. That's the one thing I really recognized with this geometry, is that hexagon is just wanting to be flat. It doesn't want to really curve at all. In order for that shape to curve, to have a curved shape, we need to start adding the pentagonal pieces that pull this geometry together in a way that it's going to want to start to create some curvature to it that then will start to create something more spherical. And the first thing was the dodecahedron that was based on that shape of putting them together just like that at the little triangular node spots. And they all have a piece that enters into that little triangular node that meets down there in the bottom. And it went around like really, really nicely, but I did feel that maybe there was a little back edge pressure and I couldn't tell if the tape was that. It felt like it was a really nice fit. It was a lot of work to make all these little pieces for this, but I was super psyched to see that the template that I've been talking about an accurate dodecahedron in for months and months and months now, actually the circle pattern itself created the dodecahedron, the 12 pentagonal faces, and it created it with these circles, pretty much 12 circles overlapping one another, creating the pentagon faces on the inside. And then if I took, from the inner vertices of inside of each of these, it would hold the dodecahedron in straight line orientation or through the center of these. So that was really, really exciting to me. But I felt like I wanted to switch gears there for a little bit. And I decided to step into just working with the flat petals like this thin petal. So it had some more flexibility to it. I could curve it and shape it in different ways. So I was like, oh, well, I have a connection point of a 3, right? I'm working with the 3 petal one, and this is the single petal. I just started cutting out petals pretty much all week. I must have cut out a few hundred petals all week, maybe 1,000 by the end of it. And so I made this, just by wrapping around. Now remember, this is just from the template itself, and it made a spherical-like cube that could be oriented like this to look at if you're looking at the vertices of those patterns, one facing up and one facing down there. So I was pretty thrilled with that. And then I was like, okay, what else can this do? Well, let's just make it into a tetrahedron. So I made, tetrahedron, one wouldn't be facing up. This, in this image here, pretend this one would be blue and facing down. I made just a little spherical tetrahedron. It's very round in its appearance, it's almost like this is the sphere around the tetrahedron. And if you put a tetrahedron at the center of each of these small triangles, the whole tetrahedron straight line version would just be in this. But you see, I'm just using the same petal, and that's basically curving to the geometric folding that's happening, that's really crisscrossing as I bring the surface back so that the petals meet in the middle at that triangle point. So this little triangle point became the kind of connector of the forms it started to create. This is a cube now because it's the two tetrahedrons, so this would be the square view of it, and this would be kind of the crosses on the diagonal face, but it's more like a ball at this point, right? So everything became more spherical. And then I got a lot bigger because I knew that, remember, I started with these two pieces, this pentagon and this hexagon. And I said, well, let's see if we start to make the form where this pentagon face would fit over top of the hexagon and then just start going around and around and around. So I had to cut out these 90 petals, that made the truncated icosahedron, the buckyball, carbon-60, off the soccer ball. And this form really shows how the pentagon and the hexagon are united at these junction points, right? They're sharing this edge, but instead of it sharing an edge, it's sharing this petal, and the connector point in this form is that same triangle that's in the golden circle seed of life. So we're going to show you that again in probably just a moment. But that became the very simple connector, which basically means one could just draw the golden circle seed of life, just with that, without adding any real lines to it other than the setup lines to draw it. And then just start making forms, right from the template itself. And the edge lengths, we could probably even create unequal edge lengths, because everything here is going to be equal edge lengths. But we could create different versions, create phi ratio size petals and start to overlap those and create a whole series of different forms. I didn't get there yet. I don't even really want to give myself that idea. But I guess I just did, because that just means a lot more cutting and testing this out. So there might be a part 2 coming down the line. But this is this one was really the first one that really got me super stoked on this pattern. Was, because after I made the big orange dodecahedron, I was like, let me make this one with just the thin petals, the 2D versions, and it just went together so beautifully in how it all folded up. And I realized that, well, the whole template for this cutout pattern is just within the golden circles. Now I had to extend the seed of life pattern more out to like the fruit of life pattern, or, as we continue to go around the circles, flower of life, fruit of life, etc. And then I just color coded each of these. Now, this is color coded for a specific reason, because there are 5 different colors on this. And the white one, for instance, see all the white ones that I'm showing, and there's one in the back of the form closer to me. So there are 6 of those white ones that we're looking at, and those would fit right in a cube. So if we do that with the red, those would also fit in a cube. There's the red one on the top, there's the red one on the bottom, one towards me, one towards you, left and right. Another one would fit in a cube. So this is showing that this spherical form would have 5 cubes around it, and these are all color-coded to show the relationship between the cubes. So it was just really, really awesome to see that the overlapping sequence of petals within the pattern itself, and I'll keep saying that, it made the dodecahedron that I was so interested in trying to figure out how to draw with straight lines for all these months, over a year of real serious analysis of that did so much of what I showed at the beginning of this video that I didn't see the obvious relationship to what the curves of the circles were actually, what information was in those. And I am just thrilled to see the more versatility, the more ways of connecting and relating to this pattern. And it does something different than what the flower of life does on its own, because the flower of life only had the points that connect, points meet, but there was no triangular little shape here, right? There's no little triangular shape where these black little triangles are. Those are all the connecting points between this. So there's very important of how that is going to influence the next part of our discussion, because I was like, okay, how I make an octahedron and icosahedron. Now, everything I've showed you at this point, the cube and the tetrahedron and the dodecahedron, those are all really pretty intimately related to one another, meaning that within this dodecahedron, there's 5 cubes, and there are also 10 tetrahedra that would be in this. So, but they all have this in common. They all meet with 3, right? 3 for at these vertices, the central vertices, 3 in a corner of a cube, and 3 at the peak of this. So that works really nice with 3, but octahedron has 4 edges meeting at a vertice, and the icosahedron has 5. So I had to do some experimenting with that to figure it out. And this is where it really got super interesting for me. So we have to take a closer look at this golden circle pattern to just realize how incredible the sacred geometry of the relationship of the pentagon is woven into this pattern. I've never come across something that is so intimately linked from a hexagonal perspective to pentagon fusion. If we're looking for hexagon pentagon fusion, this pattern does so with so much grace in terms of how this unfolds. So I didn't know this the whole time, that within this pattern, so I'm going to look at this flower of life, I'll call it the flower of life petal, but the 6 petals, the light gray, but I have a darker one here, right? And the one petal that I've been talking about so far has been the one that crosses over the top of that one. And I always knew the geometry of this little petal was 2 golden triangles back to back, right? So the golden triangle is part of a star point on a 5-pointed star. And this would be a 144-degree angle. That would be a 72-degree angle, 36-degree angle. And then what happens here, though, is that the whole length of the red outline here that goes, now this is following the other big flower of life petal, the other seed of life petal here, that actually creates the 108-degree angle. So this is actually part of pentagon geometry, because the pentagon has 108-degree interior angles all the way around it, all right, which will add up to the 540-degree angles around, the interior angles all added up together. So that is 108 interior angle on both sides with the 72. That is the Penrose tile. Now, this is a little sequence of Penrose tiles that I made a little while ago, because it is an infinite pattern that will just forever infinitely expand and never repeat the pattern. It will never repeat. It will be, it could tile everything in existence and never repeat this pattern. There's a video on it by I can never pronounce the videos the websites, the guy's name, Vitruvius or something like that. Not Vitruvius, it starts with the V, but type it in, the pattern that never repeats. And it's a very cool video that talks about Penrose tiles. And after watching that, I decided to start working with the Penrose tiles to check them out, because I was working with quasi-crystals at that time. And what was discovered with quasi-crystals being a geometry that was showing up in the crystalline structure that had the forbidden structure of the phi ratio related to crystalline structure, because before that, it was all based on cube and octahedron geometry that didn't include phi ratio, so it was called the forbidden symmetry. So these Penrose tiles are thought to have a relationship to that kind of tiling structure. So, but anyway, let's just get back to the golden circles pattern here. So the golden circle pattern is pretty much made up completely of these little shapes of Penrose tiles these Penrose tiles are created at every intersection of a seed of life petal with the golden circle petals. And that was really, really exciting to me, because what that meant was that I could overlap every single one of those locations that had the intersection of a seed of life petal with the golden circle petals could be a Penrose tile overlapping. And that is up 108-degree angles throughout the whole form, throughout the whole design is constructed out of that. And this is what it looks like now with 42 tiles just within our, this is the flower of life here that goes all the way out to get these last vertices. So we have 19 circles with the 19 phi ratio circles. And these are all color coded. So we have a blue series of Penrose tiles here, which were 15 of those, another 15 series of Penrose tiles that were the red ones. And then we have this golden version, or kind of orangish color. That was going to be the 12 of those and another set of Penrose tiles. So, but the thing is that these Penrose tiles are not just abutting one another on their edges, they are overlapping and crisscrossing here, and they're what are created when those edges overlap, those little triangular connector spaces, right? So that's what's creating the little triangles that I've been discussing, the little triangles that are the glue spot, you know, where I'm taping over, that hold the whole thing together. And what an excellent way to look at this, that thinking about the ether connection of how it weaves things together, than to actually have these little connector spots actually be related to these Penrose tiles that are connecting this together. So let's just look at that without the backdrop, because it's such a cool pattern. I mean, I'd never seen a Penrose tile layout like this, overlapping this golden circle seed of life that is integrating this hexagonal template. And now we're like, oh, and here's the phi ratio throughout this whole thing. I mean, just overlaid on top of it. Every single interior angle you see here is 108, and it's got the 144 and the 72 and the 36, and all these numbers related to phi, all within a template that is all about a 60 and 120 degrees or 30 degrees, and those divisions within there as well. So it's just phenomenal. So I cut out the whole pattern. This is really, really just like, I want to make this cutting it out like just like these pieces. And what can I do with those patterns? And one little thing I almost forgot to mention here that I saw was that there is a pattern that repeats here in the way that the color sequence actually works. You know, if I start with a red in this and a blue here, then those will continue to make red circles throughout this infinitely. And these will continue to make these blue circles as they'll follow those sequence. And then this orange colored one here in the middle, that is going to continue on and make those set of circles. And it was really showed me that the whole pattern sequence that I'd been working with of these overlocking linked circles for so long had a trinity relationship between those three. It could be any colors, but between the three colors I'm showing here was not just two circles, it was three. It was, or not even one. It was like, it was continually, there was some organization around the number three in relationship to this. I don't know, maybe more to discover there, but it was really something that stood out to me of just the trinity of the relationship between within the pattern that just revealed itself to me through cutting those out. But this is why I did all that. As I took now, instead of making the single petals, I'm now going to take the petals of the dodecahedron, which is really, the dodecahedron is the glue in this to bring along the flower of life edges that we see here. And the flower of life edges now are going to connect up to create the vertices at the center point of those dodecahedron faces. So it created the icosahedron by same connector points of the dodecahedron. Those are the little triangles. There's the pentagon circle. It's like working with circles in 3D. And they just go around. And here's another one here. Here's another. And then that created the ability to take these, I don't know, surfboards, or they look like little birds. They just swooped up to the top and all their wings met in the middle to create that beautiful five-pointed flower, which originally would want to just be flat. It doesn't, see, this is the thing, it doesn't want to curve at all. When you lay those 6 petals out, I could curve this whole thing, but at some point, if I want to start connecting vertices, it's going to start to have to pinch together, and we're going to get 5 in there. So, you know, the flexibilities of these edges, it's creating a compound, or probably near compound. There's a little bit of sloping here because it's probably either due to the paper, but also probably because the dimensions are not perfectly phi related in terms of this length to this length. But it's giving me an overall idea that the forms are all intimately connected, and it's like a kind of rhombic tricontahedron. And no straight lines basically were needed to make this. It was all just within the template. So just that was the first one. And then I was like, okay, let's now make it with the cube, because I wanted to see what was up with the octahedron, right? Because remember, back to my previous question, it was like, without the flower of life petal going across there, the longer petal, then all I was getting was just 3 of the Platonic solids. But once I had the connector of the cube, which is, once again, this is the same cube as this one, but because I'm carrying over the longer green vesicas, they're going to meet at the 6 points around that and create the octahedron. So there was the octahedron. So it's really, I'm getting the compounds of the cube and the octahedron, the dodecahedron and the icosahedron here. Those are the dual forms. And the dual forms are created out of this golden circle seed of life pattern. And then we already did the tetrahedron, but I was like, let's just make another tetrahedron out of this. Same idea, and now I'll have 2 tetrahedrons in this, just like because they're self-dual. The dual of the tetrahedron is the tetrahedron that will nest with inside it. And this one's kind of popping out of the face a little bit, but after I created this, I was like, whoa, wait a second, that looks a lot like this form that I made, Michael Evans' Trion-re. Look at the curvature of that curve that's showing up there on that flower of life petal, and it even bulges out a little bit on the side of that edge there. And this is a little bit bigger because I think those petals are a little bit bigger than that. But so anyway, this made another one. So basically what happened for me within relationship to all this was that it created all 5 Platonic solids within the template, which was just really, as Michael Evans said, kind of a spiritual experience with my sacred geometry revelations, because I have been working so intimately with this pattern and never up to this point, although being fascinated with those vesicas, decided to cut them out and try it. So I'm, very grateful to the time that Michael spent with me and the time that he'll take for a new conversation around his work. And I'm just really feel honored to have had my eyes open to exploring this pattern in a new way. So here's the other last piece of the amazing thing about the golden circles. I already described, of course, how the pentagon shows up at the center of this drawing, and it also shows up so I can draw the icosahedron at the angle with the straight lines. And another version of the pentagon now showed up. Now remember, this is just 1/2. Well, actually, there is the Penrose tile, the blue edge and the red edge. But I can continue this out, and all the vertices of another pentagon are just within the pattern, just like that. And there's a mirror one over here, and the 2 are holding hands as they're going down the circular tunnel of the golden circle seed of life here. It's just a really beautiful image to me to see that. But of course, it's only just a piece of what the whole pattern contains. So it's like I shared when I show this pattern and we just focus on this one pentagon and say, yeah, it's great, it's 100% accurate. I just want to reiterate that there's so much more that I feel is like the geometer's playground, because I've been having too much fun over here by myself and just sharing it with a few small people and apprentices who are really starting to gravitate to working with this too, that there's just so much more that can be discovered. And this just, these two little pentagons, I just figured out, I mean, I've been looking at them for a long time, but never really decided to work with them. And in my one-on-one on Monday, we were like in the awe and shock of discovery of how these just came to be, or the one of them did. And then I filled the other ones later. And then later that evening, I said, well, hey, why don't I just go around and do all of them and that are right within the central circle? And I have a shape that probably has never been constructed or drawn before, or probably never seen before. It's essentially 12 pentagons. They're alternating blue and red and blue and red and blue and red. So there's 6 blue ones and 6 red ones, because those pentagons are just all within, the vertices are all in this pattern. I mean, if you're into sacred geometry and you're into phi ratio and working with the pentagon geometry and trying to figure out relationship between hexagon and pentagon, there probably isn't a more intriguing pattern that could really captivate one's interest to take you to a whole new level of understanding that relationship. Because once you start to draw this on your own and you start to make these connections rather than me just talking about them, you'll start to see just how much intelligence is in these circles and what they might open up for you that I haven't even begin to encounter and discover on my own. So I'm really excited for the potential future of where this might lead, because I know that just within that first golden circle of putting that in there, that's all that really needs to come across to take our relationship to creating sacred works of art, sacred geometry, with using this hexagonal structure to a whole new level that will draw out the K and EW in each of us. So this pattern is the golden circles template. It's beautiful. It creates this pentagon hexagon fusion, and it's the template itself not only control these Platonic solids and a gazillion other forms, but also, the template itself is the pattern itself. And those are just a few of the amazing things of this golden circles pattern. And also that it creates a division of the circle into 30 and 60 rays. I have a whole video on that. But I wanted to, have a little gift from the ether for everybody at this end of this video from me at New Geometry. This is the little version of this golden petal dodecahedron, this little spherical version that just fits kind of like right in the palm of your hand. It's so cool to build and very easy. It's a little tricky to just cut out the along these curvatures when you have the template in hand. But this is going to be on my resource section. I think to have that at Facebook, at the New Geometers Facebook page or Facebook group. If you really like this video and you think you'd like to build one of these for yourself, you'll be able to make a nice little palm-sized spherical dodecahedron, which currently only my apprentices have that template, but I think this probably is the only one that's been made at this point. So yes, check out the New Geometers Facebook group, and I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please subscribe. I teach people to draw all the other starting images that I was showing you at my Patreon site, which helps walk beginners through from the beginning. If you're just getting new to sacred geometry, that's a great way to get started. Same thing with my apprenticeships. I'll have a new one starting up at September 5th. And I do the one-on-one mentorings, which are also a lot of fun, which I can really tailor to your interests. And let me do just a little bit of show and tell before I wrap things up so we could take a look at the forms in hand. So this is the big carbon 61, the Bucky ball, the truncated icosahedron from the hexagonal perspective, pentagon perspective. Just a really, really neat way that these all link up at those connector spots. So it really kind of help me understand. And it's alive. I mean, I can move this around. It's like flexible and pliable. It's so different than my zone tool models that I've been doing. You know, it's like, it really feels kind of organic in its presentation. Of course, I've showed you the dodecahedron. Here's the little palm-sized one. Remember, this is the color-coded one. You can color these in. You just hunt around, and before you cut it out, just color in the different petals as you go. If you held it this way, you'd have one over to each side. So hold it in this orientation, one to the left, one to the right, one forward, one back, one up, one down. Color all those, and then go on. And these were really special to me. Here's the big one, that the first one I built. This was the one that had the Trion-re, the phi-ray connection point, where those three shapes are sharing and creating that little triangle in the middle, and creating the circular structure. And then the circular faces, the kind of just overlapping those circles that would just make the rest of the form. And then here are the two, I'll share them one at a time. Here was the octahedron that was in there. So the octahedron, so the cube vertices would be right at the triangles, because that's the main connector spot. And then the long flower of life petals, I'm calling them, are the ones that would be creating the octahedron. So we got the cube octahedron compounding at that point. And same thing here, we have the icosahedron and the dodecahedron. And I think this model is just phenomenal, just beautiful to look at, especially the way these petals curve up towards the center and create that beautiful flowery pentagon shape. I mean, it does feel alive. I mean, it looks like if I took away the rest of this, we would be looking at a flower opening up here. From one each of these would be like flowers opening up to create this form with curved petals, right? So, you know, I'm just in awe of these, that they were in this in the circle pattern. That is this pattern here, golden circle seed of life. That's what this whole video is about. And I have a whole, it's going to go in a playlist that I have out there that is called the Golden Circles, Story of the Golden Circles, Evolution Story of the Golden Circles, in the Seed of Life pattern. And I think I have 18 videos. It really documents many of the discoveries I was making along the way that I felt were very significant along there. I know it's a lot of videos to take on, but if you have an interest in just seeing how this all evolved, it's all in there, and this will be the next video that goes in there. So this is the Golden Circles template in its cutout version, which is making these forms. And they're Penrose tiles. So I'm just going to reiterate a few things. This connection from the blue over here to the orange to the red to there, that's a Penrose tile. The whole thing is these phi ratio Penrose tiles. There are pentagons right within this form that I can trace out right within here. I could layer pentagons all over this. It's all hidden within the diagram itself, and it all folds up and makes cool stuff. These are just the golden circles on themselves. And this is the first one of these. And so anyway, you can just have fun working with these. And I imagine that kids of all ages will certainly enjoy the golden circles, hopefully now and well into the future. So much love and appreciation. Thank you so much for watching this. Please subscribe. And until next time, much love and peace. And I'll see you then. Bye.